Hello and welcome to the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference channel. My name is Jesse Day, and today we are joined by the editor of Silver Stock Investor and the author of this book right here, The Great Silver Bull, Mr. Peter Krauth. It's great to have you on the show.
Jesse, as always, it's fun to be here.
Well, I wanted to start off with a broad question on silver, and that is simply what are the major tailwinds you're seeing for silver as we move into 2023?
Okay, so silver really, as you know, has two main drivers. One is its industrial applications, and the other is the investment side. And I really do think that both are going to be helping to push silver higher next year. You've certainly got ongoing demand from the industrial side. The big ones are things like solar panels, EVs, electronics, even medicine. And then on the monetary side, you've got concerns, things like ongoing high inflation levels, geopolitical instabilities, and that helps drive silver as an investment and help push its monetary drivers. And so I think that that will also help push silver prices considerably higher next year.
Okay, we're going to dive a little bit more into both those things in a second, but first I want to ask about the report recently released by the Silver Institute, the interim report on supply demand for 2022 and also an outlook. What are some of the main points in that report that really stand out to you?
So let's start with sort of the high level. The first thing is that demand is supposed to be up this year. I mean, we're almost at the end of the year, but overall demand is expected to be up 16% this year over last year, which is huge for any market really, if you think about it. But one that's a relatively small market, that's really a big increase in demand. And yet overall supply is only expected to be up 2%. So there's a big gap. Again, big picture, if you look 2 years ago in 2020, there was a surplus of about, I think it's 69 million ounces. Last year, we had a shortfall of 48 million ounces. And so the Silver Institute is expecting a 4 times bigger shortfall this year than last year of 194 million ounces. And so if you compare this year's deficit to 2020's surplus, that's a swing of 264 million ounces, which is almost a quarter of the entire level of supply of silver every year. So there's some really big demand that's coming into the market, and that's really starting to show.
Absolutely, very interesting. I want to shift to silver's use in green technologies, as you touched on, particularly solar panels, but also electric vehicles. Not a lot of people know that you need silver for electric vehicles as well. So, how do you see those two things impacting the demand for silver, maybe within the next 5 years coming up here?
So, I mean, I go pretty much by the forecast, especially that I get the research from Silver Institute and the International Energy Agency. And so if you look at solar panels, that really is probably one of the single biggest drivers for silver, especially if you're looking at industrial applications. It uses 12% of the entire annual silver supply goes just to solar panels. And that's growing at a very healthy clip at about 10 to 12% a year. And so already demand is very strong. And given that, about 3% of global electricity right now, only 3% comes from solar. And yet solar is marginally in many countries, it's the cheapest way to add electrical output. So you see solar really driving much higher in terms of installations. And then you have things like the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, this $400 billion program that helps to support climate change, technologies and policies. And so that is alone supposed to help double the amount of output from solar in the US over just the next few years. And so the sort of bigger picture metric that I kind of come back to is the International Energy Agency's forecast is that solar output will be up about 8.5 to 9 times over the next 8 years, so by 2030. And so the math that I do, which is if you see that solar right now takes 12% of all of the silver supply, And then you multiply that by 8.5, 9 times. That's nearly 100% of the entire supply of silver every year would technically go just to solar. So obviously that can't happen. All these other applications will continue to demand silver. And so naturally the reaction expected is that silver prices will go much higher to help sort of counter and help balance things out. So that's really, the effects that I see from solar. You mentioned EVs. Over the next just 2 years, the Silver Institute expects that EV demand for silver, because you find it in all kinds of applications within cars, period, but then also especially in EVs. EVs use about twice as much silver per vehicle. So I think we're up to about, I think it's 30 grams versus about 15 grams for an internal combustion engine car or vehicle. So over the next just 2 years, the Silver Institute expects that the demand from the automotive sector will go from about 50 million ounces to about 90 million ounces. So that's another, again, big driver. That's about 10%, or in today's numbers for the silver market, it's about 10% of the supply. And then you have all kinds of other things, like you mentioned. You've got electronics, you have electrical applications. Really, silver is all around us. If you look at all of the gadgets and all of the technology surrounding us, flat screens, things like cell phones, tablets, keyboards, you name it. Silver is really in all of these things because it's the single best conductor of electricity, and it's the single best conductor of heat, and so and the best reflector as well. So that's why you find it, of course, in solar panels. So yeah, I mean, all of these things will continue to drive silver demand on the industrial side, and I think the future is very bright for this metal.
Yeah, there's so many industrial applications for silver, and I think most people would be quite shocked if you approached them and said, "Do you know that without silver, the modern civilization we see all around us just would not be able to exist?" I think that blows a lot of people's minds. They don't realize just how many things contain silver. Let's shift to silver as a form of money because it's one of the oldest forms of money with thousands of years of history. And a lot of people seem to forget or just not realize that. It's also a very effective way in modern times to store your wealth outside of the financial system. So, do you think we will ever return to transacting with silver, whether that be with actual bullion, with a silver backed currency, with a silver backed token on the blockchain? Do you think that that could happen in the future? And how do you see that playing out?
So, I think you'd have to really have dire circumstances, not impossible, but I think unlikely that you would necessarily be using physical silver, to transact, but, never say never. I think what's more likely is that we will see some sort of either silver-backed, I guess, mandated currency, or we already have silver-backed private currencies, if you want. There are multiple providers of these sort of tokenized digital currencies that are backed by physical silver, and that you can spend they have credit cards attached to it. You have accounts attached to it. You can spend the silver or the gold, different kinds of precious metals that are backing these digital tokens. And so, I mean, if you think about the advantages of cryptocurrency, for example, especially something on a blockchain that's decentralized and verified, etc. Really, you marry that with the world's oldest, most used, most trusted, and technically best form of money ever has been silver. Absolutely, gold is way up there. There's no arguing that, but silver has been used more than gold for transactions over history, and it's also been used longer. It has been used as a unit of account going back way before gold, perhaps as much as 1,000 years before gold. So it's proven itself. There's no question about that. People turn to it over and over when crises, come up, and so I don't see why that would be different, but it's again, we're moving forward. Hopefully, we're progressing as societies and so on. And the advantages of crypto, the blockchain, the quickness, the speed of transaction, the frictionless. Characteristics. In other words, that meaning, the lack of cost of transferring value over a network are just undeniable with crypto and the blockchain. And so I don't see why ultimately, whether that's whether that's done willingly or unwillingly, I think we're going to eventually end up there. We're going to likely have some sort of currency that is backed by physical metals, and gold and silver to me make the most sense as they've been money for thousands of years.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you there. And the comment about probably never transacting in silver coins and bullion, that's true. However, I think it is important to have some silver bullion on hand in the case of some kind of Mad Max disaster scenario. Of course, we never want that to happen. But if it does, the whole financial system shuts down. Knowing that you have some silver rounds, some silver bullion that you can probably go out there and whatever chaos is out there and be able to actually trade and transact, I think is very important. I'd like to discuss the equities for a moment here. How do you see silver miners positioned as we move into 2023? And do you favor investing in producers, developers, explorers, or a mix of all three?
So yes, all of them. The miners, the big producers right now, much like on the gold side, are amongst the highest free cash flowing asset classes you can find. Period. So they're throwing off a lot of cash. I think that, and well, if you look at the research, it tells us that going back probably almost a decade, they have, because the 2000s, they became very aggressive. They started doing a lot of acquisitions. They paid big money at the top of the market, and then they got burned. So I think they've learned their lesson. They're much more conservative now, perhaps too conservative, arguably, but that being as it is, they're because of that, their debts are much lower. They are throwing off, as I say, a lot of cash flow. They have tremendous yields. I really encourage people to go and look at gold and silver large producers to see the yields that you can get. Some cases that's upwards of 3-4%. It's really tremendous and surprising, and yet their PE ratios are very low at the same time, hence the yields high. But because they've been so, I guess, hesitant to pull a trigger on exploration, that's been one of the ways that they've saved a lot of money over the past few years, and they've become leaner. But that also means that they haven't been replacing reserves and resources that they've been depleting. So they've sort of, I guess, offloaded that responsibility to others, the smaller players, the mid tiers, and especially the junior explorers. So and arguably that's probably a good thing, because the explorers tend to be smaller companies. They are more entrepreneurial. They're more nimble. The problem is obviously always that they're not generating cash, that they are burning matches, so to speak, and they need to keep raising cash. But they're also arguably more effective at exploring than a major, because the major tends to do better just simply, running and expanding mines. So they've offloaded that responsibility to the juniors. The juniors have been doing a relatively good job of finding and expanding deposits. So I think what we're going to see is a wave. In fact, there's a huge gap between what we saw in the first half of in the first decade of the 2000s, where as the price of silver rose, the number of acquisitions, M&A, really picked up and followed the price upwards. The price has backed off, but started to gain again in the last sort of 2 to 3 years. The average price of silver in the last 3 years is about $23-24. And so that's considerably higher than it was 3 years ago. And yet there's been not only flat M&A, but falling still M&A in the sector. So the producers have not been acquiring and have not been themselves expanding their resources through their own exploration. So I think what we're going to see is they're going to start using their cash, that they've been very cash flow positive. They're going to start using their strong equity prices as a currency themselves to start acquiring a lot of these juniors that have discoveries, have proven deposits that they're starting to expand. And I think some of the majors are going to start to realize that, they may have been maybe even majors that are not in the silver space that have been ignoring silver, or majors that are silver producers that have just not been spending on the replacement of their reserves to start acquiring and merging with some of these juniors that have really some tremendous high quality deposits that have been proven up over the last few years.
Well, the VRIC is coming up January 29th and 30th. Tickets are free, guys. If you want to check them out, the link is in the description. We got a great speaker lineup, including yourself, Peter. So, what is it you're planning to present at the VRIC this time around?
So I'm going to present my outlook on 2023. We'll just be a month into the year, but I think it's going to be relatively tumultuous. A sneak peek is that I think the first, without giving too much away, I think that the first part of the year is going to be rough on general equities. I think even commodities will probably do better, but still find it somewhat difficult. I think we could see some kind of a financial event, so to speak, in the first part of the year. And I think we also will see the Fed and other central banks back off and then actually become accommodating in the second half of the year. So that I think it's really going to be a tale of two cities, so to speak, two halves. The first half and the second half of the year will look very different. The first half will be a bit more of what we've seen recently, and then not in terms of precious metals, but in markets in general. And the second half, I think, will be very likely very bullish in many markets, simply because of central banks starting to have to become accommodative once again.
Well, that sounds fascinating. Definitely can't wait for that presentation. For those who want to hear more from you, could you tell us about Silver Stock Investor and anywhere else you'd like to direct people online?
Sure. So you can find out more about my work and what I do at silverstockinvestor.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Peter Krauth. You can find me on Twitter at Peter_Krauth. And as you mentioned, I've written a book called The Great Silver Bull. It was published earlier this year. And that's available on Amazon in Kindle and in paperback. And so I really encourage people to go, if they really want to know more about the entire opportunity behind silver, the setup, how we ended up where we are today on the sort of macro side and the history, and then the particularities of the silver market, and then finally how to take advantage. Silver can be volatile, but that helps create tremendous opportunities for investors. So how they can also position in terms of building a portfolio and taking advantage of the opportunity in silver. But I think this is going to be the decade for silver if you look at the setup. It really is tremendous, like we talked about at the beginning, from both the industrial and the monetary security side of owning a precious metal. So it's a tremendous setup for silver.
Absolutely agree. Guys, get yourself a copy of The Great Silver Bull. This is like the Bible for silver, an incredible book. Highly recommended. Thank you so much for joining us, Peter, and looking very forward to seeing you at the VRIC.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Jesse.
We actually need to have a damn good recession.
The Russian economy is a gas station run by the mafia.
$41 trillion has been created out of nothing.
There's a stranglehold in China on most of these resources.
The outlook and fundamentals for the metals remains very, very strong.